started entering my early 20s, I started noticing that I was gaining 10 pounds like every year. I had tons of panic attacks all the time in school. There was one day in class where I started panicking. And so it was a very horrific experience of being like outside of my body and the world around me, the people, all their voices became very muffled. And then I went to the obstetrician and she said, "Oh, you're going to harm your baby if you eat that. You have to stop now." I felt like I could not handle the world. Hi everyone, my name is Ellie. I'm 35 years old. I'm married and I have 2 young children, age 4 and 2, and I'm a stay-at-home mom. But before I was a stay-at-home mom, I had a lot of health problems, a lot of mental problems, and I suffered firstly with obesity. So I used to be 240 pounds. I really suffered with mental illness. I had depression, I had panic attacks, and I had some symptoms of depersonalization disorder. I had issues with constipation, where it had gotten so extreme that I would only go once or twice a month, and I would only really be able to go because of laxatives, and it would be like hours and hours of pain, like 4 to 6 hours of just nonstop pain. And just a whole bunch of other things. I had boils and I had difficulty walking, and my life was just in shambles. It really was. Okay, so all my life, I was a pretty healthy, normal weight. It wasn't until I started entering my early 20s. I'm 35 now, so it's a little bit ago. And I started noticing that I was gaining 10 pounds like every year, like pretty much after high school. But then the pounds really started to pack on because I had no tools at my disposal to understand how to eat properly. And I also had no tools in order to take on the world. Like when bad things happened, I could not handle it. And I really, really struggled. And I would, just cry and I would be in a fetal position. And, you know, everything would just turn dark. And I went to the doctor. I would go to the doctor pretty regularly, even though I didn't really care about myself. And I was just like, okay, I guess we'll see what happens. And I went and they just suggested calorie counting. They said, you download this app, you put your food in, and you exercise. And to me, it just made me so frustrated because it's like I have this uncontrollable hunger. I was so hungry and I had difficulty going and exercising because of my legs and my buttocks. They were just so big, my thighs would rub and I would have boils and small holes were forming in between my thighs because they were just rubbing so much. And when I went to the doctor, and also I had tons of knee pain. Like I dislocated my knee when I was in middle school, and I broke my knee when I was my other knee in high school. And so it was really difficult for me to walk and do physical activity. And then when I went to the doctor again to talk about my mental health, they just put me on, I believe it was called Lexapro, an antidepressant. They put me on an antidepressant and it didn't really help. It didn't really make me feel, it just kind of made me feel weird, like this weird fog. And, you know, I just felt let down by the doctors. I just felt like there was no hope for me. So I gave up hope. So I was going to school to become a teacher. I was really inspired, and I thought that I could help children. And I thought that it would be a good place for me to be a teacher, especially if I wanted to be a mother and a wife one day. And so I started pursuing it, and I was going through college, and it took me a while because I honestly had a lot of brain fog. I had a lot of brain fog, and it was difficult. But then I started to notice as I continued to get closer and closer to graduation, I realized, oh, I can do this. I am smart, and it helped, but it didn't help enough to the point where there was one day in class where I started panicking because I started looking around, and I felt like this is really hard for me to talk about. Sorry. I felt like I was outside of my body. I started looking down and I saw my hands and I recognized them, and I looked at my feet, but they felt like they weren't mine. And so it was a very horrific experience of being like outside of my body and the world around me, the people, all their voices became very muffled. And I was basically like disassociating to a point of extreme. And I remember just screaming and crying in class. And I was like, I just can't do this anymore. I had tons of panic attacks all the time in school. And yeah, I just thought it would be, and I just kept trying to go back, kept trying to go back. And then it was just like, you can only withdraw from courses for so long. And I just thought it would be best if I just, got a job. And so I worked in retail, because that's all I could really get. And then I kept having more and more panic attacks. Like I just like my knees would buckle and I would just be in tears. And, there'd be like this long line of people at the cash register. And I was just like, it was too much. I felt like I could not handle the world. So after I dropped out of college, I am so blessed and lucky to have my husband. He was the one that supported me, and we rented a house with, at that time, I think it was four other people, three or four other people, and we were all sharing a house and we were all renting it. And I was surrounded by love. I was surrounded by some of the best people that I would ever know, and I'm still friends to this day. But even with that love, even with the support of my husband, I just couldn't do it. Every day I'd wake up and I would just be like, I'm worthless. I'm worthless, and there's nothing I can do to make better of the situation. And I tried everything. I dove into like painting and art. I tried opening up a business. I did coding. Like, I'm trying to teach and learn all these things. And I just kept returning to the junk food, the carbohydrates, and the processed foods. And we made the garage into like a gym because my other roommates, they were really fit and healthy. And I tried to do it too. And I just like kept getting so frustrated with myself. I felt like yeah, I was just like, I can't do this. And then I would just go hide in my bed again. And I did that for so many years. It's so embarrassing almost to think back to who I was now and like the potential that I could have been. But I think we all have to start somewhere for sure. How I found keto was that I was laying in bed and doing what I was doing all the time, which is just watching YouTube videos. And all of a sudden, I came across this video of a woman who said that she lost 90 pounds in 3 months. And I was like, what? Can I do that? What is it? I will do anything to lose it, because that was about what I needed to lose, about 100 pounds, 90, 100 pounds to be healthy. And it was a wonderful video where she described the ketogenic diet, and she actually went into the science behind it about how you go into ketosis, you become fat adapted. And I was just like enthralled by it. I just felt like this like bright shining light, like, oh, what, really? And that's all it took, really. It just took that one video, and then I started doing all this research, and so when I first started doing keto, I'd say I started feeling better within 2 weeks. I felt like it was a really drastic change because it's like, one, I'm full, and two, I started noticing that my skin started clearing up. I have rosacea, I have perioral dermatitis, and I have keratosis pilaris. It's a lot of big, long words to basically say my gut's a mess from being so constipated my whole life. So, oh, I don't ever want to think about that again, but it's true. My gut was such a mess. And when my face started clearing up, that was like, what is going on? And I started going to the bathroom more regularly, and it wasn't taking hours of my life. Yeah, it just, just, and I remember like my roommates looking at me being like, oh, what is she doing? She seems brighter. She seems happier. And I told them what I was doing, but like they were just like, oh, that's good, because they had seen me do so many things to try to improve my health, that they were like, yeah, you can do it. But they probably in the back of their head were thinking like, oh, I hope she gets it this time. I felt like keto, it really did help me. I follow like Dr. Barry a lot, and I believe that if you're on the proper human diet spectrum, anywhere from low carb to carnivore, then like you're in the green, you're good. And if you're feeling like you still need improvements, then that's when you should eliminate more until things start to heal for you. And I feel like I could have done keto for much longer period of time if I didn't have the doctor, that authority figure, just kind of like ruined it all for me, because I really did try to go back so many times, and I did it for about 6 months, and I had lost 53 inches, or sorry, I had lost 53 pounds, so many inches, and my face started clearing up, and my constipation started going away, and my irregular periods, which were like, so sporadic. I'd have them like every 3 months, every 2 months. Who knew when it actually would come? If I didn't track it, I would have no idea. And then they became regular. And I was able to become pregnant with my husband. And I was like, wow, my life is just like so amazing just with simply changing my food. And then I went to the obstetrician and she said, oh, what do you eat? And I told her that I was eating a ketogenic diet. And then all of a sudden, I saw this look on her face. And she just was like, you're going to harm your baby if you eat that. You have to stop now. And all of a sudden, like everything that I had done to build myself up crumbled and cracked and broke. And I just kind of gave up again. So when my doctor kind of shattered my dreams of my beautiful health, I found it was a really, really stressful time. It was 2020. Everyone remembers what happened in 2020 when I was having my first baby. And so I felt really isolated. And in that isolation, even though I had my husband with me and he is literally like my best friend, my rock, my everything, I felt like I just kept going back to the food. And I was doing so much research and I was like, okay, low carb pregnancy, that's a thing. And I started reading and watching all these seminars. But then the doctor's words just kept echoing in my head, like, you're going to harm your baby. You're going to harm your baby. And that's the last thing I wanted to do because I love my baby and I wanted to have a family. And I felt like I had purpose being a mother for the first time. And so there was a lot of pressure, on me. And I knew how important food was, but I had these conflicting ideas in my head. And so, yeah, I'd say that my energy went down. Like my energy went down. I was kind of more crass. Like you can see I'm pretty I have a bit of a bubbly personality and I'm all smiles and stuff. But like, then there's also like the perfectionistic side of me. And there's also like the side of me that gets really frustrated and angry. And I try to keep the peace, but then like something kind of, and I get upset just like anybody else. But it was just, I felt like it was all consuming, and I remember just like eating this bowl of pasta while I was pregnant and then just being like, oh, what am I doing? And then I would just go, oh, but the taste's so good. And I would just keep eating and eating. So there were like these little moments of being like, you shouldn't be doing this. But just with like the cascade of all the different perspectives and information and stuff, I ended up just going back to the way I was before. I mean, I was happy I was going to be a mom, but I also wasn't happy in general because the world was in chaos. And it was like, what kind of world am I bringing this baby into? It's just a lot of stuff that happened. And I just kind of wish that I got a second opinion, if I'm being honest. I wish I went to a different doctor. I wish that I could have continued my good health. But now I know that God had a plan for me for the future to really reach my full potential, so I can't be too mad. With my second pregnancy, I was eating, pretty clean, whole food. I was really aware of like, ingredients in food. And when my son was born, he was healthy, he was beautiful. And I still struggled with breastfeeding. I could not, and it was, the latching was very painful. And so I decided that I was going to pump. And I still couldn't produce enough, but I pumped and pumped. And I did the same thing with my daughter too. And I did like a combination of breast milk and formula for as long as I could. It was about like 4 months for each of them, I believe. And then when my son was around 5-6 months old, that's when I kind of found out about the carnivore diet like the first time, because my husband has really bad chronic ulcerative colitis. And he kind of found out about the carnivore diet through Dr. Jordan Peterson. We kind of found out about it at the same time, but he really went for it. And he's like, I'm going to go and I'm going to do it. And I kind of was like watching him and like paying attention to what he was doing. And I slowly started like tapering off. And by the time my son was 6 months old, I had done it for like like a month or two. And so I started feeding my son a carnivore diet because he was eating what I was eating. And we were doing baby-led weaning. So, no baby food or anything like that, just real food. So his first meal was like eggs and steak and eggs. And my son loves meat. He loves meat, and he's been such a good meat eater. But like from that first time, and this is not like me being on YouTube or anything. I don't really count it because it was just so long ago. That from that first time to the second time, there was like a bit of there was a long space of time. So, but I kept him on the carnivore diet. I kept him on it because I knew how important it was and how beneficial fat and protein is in animal products. So my son has technically been carnivore longer than I have in succession. And my daughter, we started getting her in on. So when I officially started carnivore was May of 2023. And after a couple of months of that, we got my daughter into it, and my son had been carnivore that whole time, basically, which is so cool. So since I switched to the carnivore diet, I feel like I'm eating to satiety. My whole life, I felt like, I could fill my plate so many times and I just keep eating and eating. I would, I guess, be called a volume eater until I felt my stomach stretch. That was when my brain was able to say, oh, you're full, you're done eating. And it wasn't tied to an emotion anymore. Like every single meal that I had was tied to emotion: happiness, anger, sadness, excitement, boredom. Like every meal was just tied to food. And now I understand the importance of fat and protein, and you don't need carbs. And this is kind of shocking to me because, I grew up a standard American diet. If you wanted to be healthy, you had to eat your vegetables and you had to make sure you had a lot of whole grains. And I was actually told by my doctor after I had given birth to my daughter that if I wanted to produce breast milk, that I would have to eat lots of oatmeal. And I did that, and I could not produce milk at all. And I was eating so many bowls of oatmeal and various other carbs. They just said, keep eating the carbs. And I really, really believe deep in my gut that if I had eaten more fat, I would have created fat in my breast and been able to sustain my children. And this is like really upsetting to me because I feel like my nourishment's been redacted. You know what I mean? Like the information that is needed to not only birth a thriving human, right, but to just be a thriving human, that knowledge is just not available. Even now, if you go to the doctor, if I told them that I was eating a carnivore diet, I actually kind of like hinted at it. It's like, oh, I eat a lot of meat. And then my primary doctor was like, oh, but you don't want your cholesterol to get too high. So I just kind of shut my mouth and I was like, oh, I'm eating a whole food diet. And I left it at that. I just didn't want to argue, honestly. Ever since I started doing the carnivore diet, just everything is even better than keto. I like to call it keto 2.0. Like it's just the next step to truly getting your life back. And, like I said, my depression lifted, my constipation became no more. It became regular. I continued to lose more weight. And then within the first year of the carnivore diet, I lost 30 pounds. And to some people, that might not seem like a lot, like, oh, you only lost 30 pounds in a year, but I actually lost 30 inches off my body as well. So I became like the best version of me physically, mentally. I became a better mother. Being a carnivore family, it is so much easier because there's less ingredients. So you're not chopping all these vegetables that you're not actually going to chop. They're just going to rot in the back of your fridge. And my kids, I mean, like I let them try vegetables, because I'm like I said earlier, if you're a proper human diet, if you're somewhere on there. So if my kids really wanted to eat green beans, for example, I'd let them eat it, but they won't touch the darn things. And I'm like, I'm not buying this anymore. But a typical day of eating, my daughter loves sausages and bacon for breakfast, and my son will have the same. Maybe he'll have like a couple of eggs with it. And then for lunch, a typical lunch would be like chicken thighs or burger patties with cheese. My daughter doesn't like cheese, so she wouldn't have cheese, but with cheese or without cheese. And then a typical dinner, like what I like to do is I like to get like a chuck roast, which is, you know, like a cheaper meat or price wise. And I like to cut them really, really small. And then I'll actually pan fry them. And it's absolutely delicious. I love fish. I love, I've been eating a lot of sardines lately. I've been eating a lot of sardines, and because it's so easy and so filling. I do put a little bit of avocado mayonnaise. Like, does it affect me? No. Does it make the food taste good? Yeah, and I eat the fish. So I've been enjoying that. It's so funny. My son, he'll come up to me, he goes, sardines, and he loves them. So I have the picky child, which is my daughter, and then I have the not pick at all picky child, which is my son. And I think it's kind of ironic that one started off with lots of plants and one didn't. But if we can't afford it, we'll love to get picanha or we'll get ribeye, but we don't get that often. But yeah, we keep it really, really simple. And I like to show I show what we eat. Like I do like what I eat in the day, like little shorts, or they're part of my video, because I just want to be an example. Like carnivore isn't scary and it's not weird. And it's actually probably what a lot of people are needing nowadays. A lot of people are seeking simplicity. So when my family found out I was doing the carnivore diet, they were just like, really? And then they just kind of stayed quiet. They didn't say anything. They were kind of like judging from afar, I felt like. And then when I started getting my kids into it, that's when everyone started having an opinion and started being like, you cannot just feed your kids meat. What are you doing? And at this point, I'm feeling pretty great. I'm feeling confident. I have done tons of research. I'm not letting anyone bully me into like thinking anything else. I mean, I'm open-minded. Like I'll always be open-minded. That's how I started eating this way in the first place. But I just told them to watch my children. Watch my children, see how they're doing. Are they healthy? Is their skin glowing? Do they have tons of energy? Oh my gosh, they have tons of energy. The blessing, I'm just kidding around. They have tons and tons of energy. And I just said, watch them, see how they're growing. And they're so smart. They're so funny. They're like the best little, my sister, she agrees wholeheartedly with this. She won't do it herself, but she's like, yeah, it's working for you. That's awesome. And she says they're superhumans. She's like, you've birthed superhumans. I think that when you pursue carnivore for yourself and you have people that maybe are concerned or maybe who are judgmental, just be the example. Don't try to convince anyone to do the carnivore diet. You be the shining example. And I think more and more people will become more interested versus you trying to shove it down their throat. And now they kind of just, when my children go to my grandma or to their grandma's house, she says, what can I feed them? Can you pack a meal for them? And I'm like, yes. So it's all good now. It's awesome. It's kind of funny because it's not like my kids have been perfectly carnivore. Like there was this, I've let them try other things. Like if we go out to eat, I let them have, which is very rare, by the way, but I let them, eat something that might not be good for them because there's this hard balance that you have to do. I feel like when you eat differently from everybody else, it's like, that your children are going to grow up in a world that does not follow the same guidelines as you do, right? And so I don't want them to not know what pizza tastes like, because when they get older, they're probably just going to want to eat pizza all the time and throw mom and dad's advice, right out the window. And so I give them the autonomy to do that, but I make sure the places we go to are higher quality. And obviously, I'm not letting them eat like an enormous amount of it. I don't bring it into my home. There was a period of time where my kids were more like animal based, like they would eat meat and fruit, or they would have like some nuts or something like that. Like I said, I follow the Dr. Berry spectrum, but nowadays there's pretty much just meat and cheese and yogurt in my fridge, and I have like some frozen blueberries that I let them have every once in a while when we have yogurt. But for the most part, it's like they're carnivore. And I noticed a big behavioral change when they do eat things that are not carnivore, for instance, or like it's mostly with my daughter. She'll just want to snack all the time. Like, oh, I do want to have some pecans, or I want to have some coconut, or and she's not touching her meat. That's a problem. And so I have to kind of, it's something, like I said, I was struggling with. I actually had a little podcast on my channel called Mother Knows Best, where I would interview other mothers who are feeding their children a little bit differently, because I don't want the children of today to grow up to be sick, and I want them to be filled with the knowledge that they can take their health in their own hands. But I was also like, well, how are other mothers doing this? And so I would interview low carb moms and keto moms and carnivore moms, and just try to collect as much data as I could from real people. And it's really important too, just to like watch your kids and see how they react to certain foods. And so it's been a wild ride for sure, trying to figure out my children's nutrition, but I think it's worth it in the end. For me, my spiritual life began when I became a mother. This is a real quick story. So I was laying there in pain. Obviously, I'm in labor and I'm scared and I'm nervous. And I kept tensing my leg. I kept tensing my leg when I was having contraction. And so my leg was hurting more than the contractions itself. Like, that's how much pain, right? Because I didn't know how to, like, release it from my body. And the doctors were like, oh, well, do you want to have an epidural? And I really didn't. I really didn't want to have an epidural. I wanted to do it as natural as possible. And I was like so nauseous, and I was like, oh, I don't know. And then my leg just kept hurting, and they made me watch the dumb video, like with all the information. I was like, ah. And so I was like, okay, fine, I'll get it. And the lady comes in with the needle, and she's walking, and I go, okay. And I go to sit up. And that's when in that moment of laying down to sitting up, I started asking for God. I started going, oh God, what do? I don't want to do this. Please help me. Just like out of a moment of panic, because I didn't really have a relationship with God. As soon as I sat up, my water broke. And the lady with the needle turned around and goes, no, we're having a baby. And she walked right out the door. And I said, wow, that was amazing. And ever since then, I have had a relationship with God, and I believe that my life has been through so many challenges and really good things too. I've been very blessed, I can say, for my whole life. And I can look back and see how my story was written, and all the different chapters, and why people are coming into my life, and the weaving and the intricacy of it all. And I feel like everything is planned. I feel like God has a plan for me. He has a plan for everybody. And I feel like my connection with God became even greater because my basic needs were satisfied finally. I was in a healthy body. I had a healthy mind. And I was able, and when you have those basic needs, food, water, shelter, satisfied, you can start to go up and do more metaphysical things or artistic things and seeking community. And so I feel very secure, and I feel very safe. Even when things are really hard now, I feel like I can handle it because I have God on my side. So it's been really nice. I think that a lot of people go through their life not really understanding their purpose, or maybe they don't feel loved, maybe they don't like themselves, maybe they feel stuck in a body like I did that just made you miserable. And I feel like the biggest takeaway from finally reaching health, when it seemed like such an unobtainable thing, is that you have to have faith in yourself. You have to be able to look at yourself and go, I can do this. And I think a lot of it has to do with self-confidence. When you're just like at the bottom of the ditch, that's how I say, like, before all of this, I was at the bottom of the ditch, and I would look up and I would see the beautiful bright blue sky and all the trees and the birds, and I would just try to climb. I'd grab into that mud and I would go up and up, and then I would slide back down. And sometimes it just feels like you're bogged down there, like you cannot get up no matter how hard you try. But I think that we all have a strength within us to really push ourselves if we really need to have a strength, to have the ability, because we're all born with talents and we're all born with blessings in certain circumstances. And so I know there's so many people out there without hope, and they don't think that they can get better, or they don't think that it's even possible to have a different life than they had before. And I think if you have the right information or the right connection with, like, say you have like a really good friend who can help you along, I feel like it makes a world of a difference. But you have to love yourself first in order to even be open-minded enough to absorb the information, because if you're in that dark cloud like I was, or at the bottom of the ditch, it can just seem so hopeless. So I want to encourage others to open your ears, open your eyes, and know that it is possible to heal and it is possible to do things beyond your wildest imaginations. Yeah, that's my biggest hope for people, is that they can find it within themselves to heal and to change.